Welcome to Travel with John and Christine, where in this episode we cover our trip to the Flinders Ranges, which is a 4.5 hour drive north of Adelaide in South Australia. Travelling along National Highway 1 through Port Wakefield, going past Snowtown, Crystal Brook and Port Pirie, turning off at Stirling North just short of Port Augusta onto the Flinders Ranges Way. You go through Quorn and Hawker through some magnificent countryside, turning into Wilpena Pound, our first stop. The Flinders Ranges are the largest mountain ranges in South Australia, which starts about 200 kilometres north of Adelaide. They began forming about 800 million years ago and is the only place on Earth where 350 million years of near continuous geological sequence can be found. The Adnyamarna people are the Aboriginal group who inhabited the range for tens of thousands of years. The Flinders Ranges are named after Matthew Flinders, the English navigator who sighted the peaks in 1802. Flinders Ranges National Park was renamed Ikara Flinders Ranges National Park in 2016. Ikara meaning meeting place in the Adnyamarna language. We set up our campsite in the Wilpena Pound resort and stayed for 3 nights. It was unseasonably cool and wet for late October. It can be pretty hot and dry at this time of year, and we were lucky enough to see plenty of wildlife and running water in creeks that might usually be dry at this time of year. We were even allowed to set up a little campfire in our fire pit. Our first walk was along the Pound Gap Trail. There was plenty of mud and water running in creeks. We even had to take our shoes off at one of the crossings to get over the creek without getting our shoes and socks wet. We went up to the Wangara Lookout, which was a 7 kilometre 3 hour return trip, but there were some pretty steep parts, but well worth the effort to see the panoramic views of inside of the Wilpena Pound. At the end of the Pound Gap Trail and at the bottom of the steeper part of the walk is Hills Homestead, set amongst magnificent river red gums. Read about the original inhabitants of the homestead and their struggle with the harsh conditions, and learn about the Adnyamarna people, who were the original inhabitants of this area. The next day we drove away from the campground and headed about 15 kilometres north towards Huck's Lookout. It was amazing to see great views back of Wilpena Pound. We then drove along the road another 15 k's to Stokes Hill Lookout, which had even more magnificent views. Not recommended for caravans on this road, but 4-wheel drives were fine. We then headed south along the Flinders Ranges Way to check out the amazing rock formations of the Flinders Ranges. A little further down the road, we turned in left onto Martin's Well Road, where there was magnificent views and a few little creek crossings to go over. We found a little turn off into a great little plateau viewing platform where we got a 360-degree views of the area that we were in. The water had subsided significantly, so we decided to take on the walk from the campground through Pound Gap and Hills Homestead and across the flat Pound floor toward Bridle Gap. The trek was considered moderately challenging, however, we had quite a few creek crossings and lots of mud to squish through. After the 18-kilometre round-trip walk, we had our last night camping in Wilpena Pound before moving north 58 kilometres to Alpana Station campground. The next day, as there had been no rain and the road from Blinman to Parachilna had reopened, we drove from Alpana Station to Blinman along the Parachilna Gorge Road to the Outback Highway and onto the state heritage town of Beltana. There are a few permanent residents, phone reception, toilets and signage at significant sites, and it's also the place where my family ancestors lived. They sailed from Kent and arrived in South Australia in 1849. My third great-grandfather passed away in 1896 at Beltana, and this rundown property is still owned by his descendants. After exploring Beltana, we headed back to camp, stopping off at Parachilna and at the Prairie Hotel for refreshments. And then again at the Blinman Hotel. There are some worthwhile places to stop off at with interesting menus and memorabilia and artwork. After chatting to the station owners at Alpana, David and Sally, we decided to drive the Sunset Hill track and take in some of the magnificent scenery. The rolling hills led to steep and rocky tracks, and we soon decided that as we weren't in a four-wheel drive, we should turn back to camp. The next adventure was through Bunyeroo Valley, which is to the west of the Flinders Ranges way. Some magnificent scenery throughout the day was just amazing and blew our socks off. When you turn off the Flinders Ranges way, you get onto an unsealed road called Bunyeroo Road. Initially, we drove through grassy plains covered with native pines and bare hills. Make sure you stop off at the Scenic view from Razorback Ridge. After the viewpoint, you head down a steep descent into the Bunyeroo Gorge. Once down into Bunyeroo Creek, you actually drive up the creek bed. Stop off and follow one of the many signed hiking trails alongside the creek to see ancient rock formations and stunning views. Driving further, we came out of Bunyeroo Valley and onto the Brackena Gorge Road, then turned left at a crossing after a creek onto Aruna Valley Road. At the end of the track, we came onto the Aruna Hut, which was built in 1925, a pug and pine basic hut with 4 rooms and a rammed earth floor. Heading back along the same track, we turned left into the Brackena Gorge Road before hitting the tarmac again and driving back to camp. A long but amazing day, driving over 100 kilometres over mainly bumpy creek beds and muddy tracks, and we were really thankful of the high clearance of the ute. The following day it was back into Blinman to go on the Blinman Mine Underground guided tour. Blinman is a historic copper town where copper was discovered in 1859 by a shepherd, Robert Blinman. The mine was operational between 1862 and 1907, where in total there was around 10,000 tonnes of copper removed. The underground experience offers a unique journey into the heart of a historic copper mine. The weather was still lovely and water was still running in creeks, so we decided to go back to the Blinman Pools hike, starting at Aboriginal village on the Parachilna Gorge Road. We followed the Parachilna and Blinman creeks through beautiful rugged country, sheer cliffs and creek beds. The walk to the second pool was 12 kilometres and 5 hours return. It was challenging across boulders, steep inclines with no real formal track. There was nobody around other than the feral goats, so we had a dip in the refreshing pool at the top of the walk. The trail is on private land on Alpana Station. Our last day in the Flinders Ranges had some storm clouds developing. We found a gap in the rain showers to go on the Alpana Station East Walk, an easy 4-kilometre loop trail taking over just an hour and walking over grassy flatland, through creek beds and past relics of times gone by. We were lucky to make it back in time before the heavy thunderstorms hit. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Travel with John and Christine, where we went to the Flinders Ranges. Don't forget to like, subscribe and comment and share to join us on more of our travels.